Good day everyone, and welcome to my tutorial walkthrough of the Spa Invoice project. Make sure you read the project description here that just says, hey, they've already got an existing system, but there's a lot of problems. And we want to fix these problems. So we're going to take the information that was in Chapter 8 and we're going to apply it to this project. Hope you will find this information helpful as we complete these steps. Now I've already downloaded the file and I haven't enabled the editing button so that I can modify my file, so hopefully you've done that as well. So let's go to look at step 2 here. Just saying that formulas have precedence and dependence possibly. So we can use the tools that are built here into Excel to look at those precedents and those dependents. What we're going to do for this one is we're going to go to the invoice worksheet and we're going to select cell F31. Then we're going to use trace precedents and trace dependents to look at the formulas to make sure they are constructed properly. If we see errors, we need to fix them. So let's go ahead and jump over to the Excel file. As it said, we're going to go to cell F31. So I'm going to scroll down there. Here's row 31, column F. I'm going to click on that. Now I want to be able to see those precedents and the dependents. So I'm going to go up here to the Formulas tab. Once I'm here, I'm going to go to the Formula Auditing group. Now let's make sure that we click on Trace Precedents. And there we can see the arrows of where our formula is getting its information from. And right away we can see that there's an issue with this one. I see that while this is a subtotal, we're not getting all of the rows. So I want to fix this. So we should be getting some F15 to F30. So we will just change 16 to 15. We should see the change right away. I'll hit the enter key. Now if we go back up here, click on trace precedents. Now that I've seen the precedents, I want to see what the dependents look like. Click precedents once again to take all that off. Let me go ahead and fix that by remove arrows. So if we just make sure we're in the subtotal field here, F31. Now we're going to click the dependents again. Now we'll see any places where the information from here is being used, and we can see that it is being used here in this formula. And we can see there's some errors in these formulas, but what's important here is that we can see that the subtotal field F31 is being used for another couple areas. So if we click here, F31 times E33, we can see it's being used there, and if we click here, F31 times F35, it will be used here as well. And we can see here we have a circular reference in that we're saying, hey, do the sum including myself, and that's just a circular reference. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm sure we're going to fix that later on. So that is looking at our precedents and dependents, seeing where our information is coming from and seeing where is using our location as well. So I'm going to remove the arrows and we'll go on to the next step. Now back on our instruction set, we will see that we've got step 2 done. We're going to look at step 3. Evaluating the formula walks through the steps taken in calculating the result of a formula. You'll now use the evaluate formula to fix the error that we already noticed in F33. So on our invoice worksheet again, we're going to use the evaluate formula button to determine what is wrong with the formula in cell F33 and then fix that formula. Let's go ahead and jump back over there now, and we will work on fixing that problem here in F33. We see that we're using F31 times E33. So if we look at that, I'm going to hit the F2 button to see where my formula, what parts are my formula. Alright, well obviously I can't take this value times this text, so that's what our problem is. But we can look at this in another way. If I take off F2, or I hit the escape button, here we see evaluate formula here in our formula auditing group once again. So if we click on our formulate or evaluate formula, we can evaluate this. Here is our formula, and saying the reference invoice, which is what worksheet we're working on. We're in cell F33. You see that it's using an absolute reference. And the formula says take these relative values, F31 times whatever values in E33. Well, we can evaluate this, we can step through it. So you can see if we evaluate it, it says, okay, there's a value of 175 in F31. Now what value does it see in E33? It sees text, sales tax. Well, that's just junk and we can't do anything with that. And that's why we get a value of an error. So we can easily step through this and see, okay, sum this formula, evaluate that, $175 is there. We can use this to evaluate our formula. If it's a very complex formula, then we can usually find out where our problem's at. I like to use the shortcut F2 because I can see which cells are highlighted. But if you're working with multiple worksheets, multiple workbooks, then sometimes this can be a problem. But for simple formulas, this can work, or you can use the F2 shortcut. But the book wants us to use evaluate formulas as a tool here in our formula auditing group. Well, we know what the problem is. Once again, I'm going to use the shortcut F2. And I'm just going to fix it by simply saying, okay, the sales tax is actually this tax rate. We want to get our sales tax, we're going to take our subtotal times our tax rate, and that'll give us what our sales tax is. So if I simply drag this over, or you can just correct your formula to show that you're using D33, not E33, then that'll fix your problem. We'll hit the enter key. Our formula is now fixed. We hit the OK button. We can see that the 7.5% of $175 is $13.13. So now we know that that is the sales tax that's placed on to our subtotal if we have a tax rate of 7.5%. All right, so we fixed that problem. Let's jump back over and take a look at our instruction set again. So we fixed that. Now on step 4. A circular reference, which I mentioned earlier, is an error a majority of the time in a worksheet indicating a singular formula that references itself, as I mentioned earlier. So on our invoice worksheet, we're going to identify and correct the circular reference. We know where it's at, but if we go back over here to our worksheet and we come up here, we can say, here's error checking. If we drop this arrow down, circular references, it identified one in F35, which is where we expected. So if we go there, F35, we have a circular reference here. And we can get help on it. We can trace the error. We've got a lot we can do here. We know by looking at it, F31 divided by F35 divided by itself just doesn't, or the sum of F31 through F35 doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm just going to hit F2. And I'm going to back off F35. Looks like I deleted it. All right, so F2. It did not like that at all. All right, we'll do it a different way. Instead of just editing it the way I usually do, since it's a circular reference, I'm just going to back this off one cell and delete the 5, make that a 4. Now we can see the blue box there, and we're not referencing ourselves. We hit enter, we should see a value now, just taking our subtotal plus our sales tax. There's no other fee in the other field, so there's nothing to add there. Hit enter, and now we have our value, which makes sense when you add these two together. So now we've fixed that circular reference problem. So if we go here, we'll see we do not have a circular reference anymore. All right, let's go back to our instructions and see what our next step is. So if we scroll on down here to step 5, we're going to use validations now. We're going to create a list validation on the therapist field to only allow the entry from the list of therapists found on the therapist worksheet in our workbook. So it gives us very simple instructions here. On our invoice worksheet, select cell E10. So do that right away. So go up to E10. On the invoice worksheet. I was jumping ahead of myself. So now we see, okay, therapist. Well, we want to use a list validation here. So we're going to add a list data validation using cell range A2 through A4 from that therapist worksheet that I jumped to. That's going to be a source of our list. So if we make a change there on that list, it'll make a change on our invoice worksheet. So here we're going to use data validation, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go on up here to our ribbon again, and we're going to go to the data tab. So make sure you click on the data tab. Once you're here, you're going to see that we have data tools here as a group, and then we've got data validation. So I'm going to click data validation, and now we can see that we have the information we need. So what we're going to do is all that information that gave us from the other page, we're going to apply right here. So let's click on the settings tab here. Allow what type of value? Well, we have a list that we want to use. Where do we want to get that information from? It told us that we want to use A2 through A4 from the therapist worksheet there. So I'm going to click on the therapist worksheet, and I'm going to select A2 through A4. Hit enter. Now there's the source of my information. Now that I've got my validation criteria set, I want to give it an input message so that when you hover on the cell or click on the cell, you'll be prompted with a message. And that information was given to us. So we're going to put an input message, select a therapist, then we're going to enter the actual input message itself, select therapist who delivered the service listed. So just copy this information, then on the third tab, the error one, we're going to do an invalid name as the title for our alert, and the name you entered is not valid. Please select a name from the list. It's going to be the message. So let's put this information in there now. So we can see we're going to do this. Put the title here. I'm going to select therapist who delivered the service listed. Make sure to include the period there. Put that as my input message. Now I'm going to do my error alert. And here I'm going to select invalid name as my title. And for the error message, get all of this data here, including the period. And I'm going to hit OK. Now I've created my validation rule. The next thing it wanted us to do is it wanted us to actually test this out. If you recall from the instructions, it wanted us to select Christy Istis. So you can see I've got my message here, the input message, and there's the input title. Now I'm going to drop this down, and there's Christy Istis. Now if I go in here and I start to type something, there is my error message because I didn't follow the rules. So we stop the user from being able to put bad data in, and we give them a message that says exactly what to do. This is how we're protecting our data in our workbook. So we've got Christy Istis still selected. Let's go back to our directions. Now that we completed step 5, we're going to go scrolling down here. Step 6. Looks like we're going to enter another validation rule. This is going to be a decimal data validation rule for the cell range. So make sure you select all of E15 through E30 for decimals that are less than or equal to 2. And then here's our input message title, the message itself, our warning alert, and our error message for that. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did. We're just going to make sure we select a different type of data validation. So if we go back over to our worksheet, we're going to make sure that we go to the proper cell, and that was E15 through E30. So make sure to select E15 through E30. Same thing, come up to the data tab, data tools group, data validation, our settings, we're going to allow for a decimal value. If you recall, we wanted a decimal value that was less than or equal to 2. So we're going to change the data rule, less than or equal to. The maximum value is 2. Now we're going to input we're going to put in our input message and our error message. So go ahead and type that information now. So your input title is hours, and the input message that the user will see is enter the number of service hours. Then select over to your error alert and put in that information. Now remember what I said in the instruction there. This is a warning alert. So we're going to change our style to warning, and then we're going to put our title and message here. Once you have your warning error alert completed, your data validation task is completed. Now just hit OK. You can see as you're there in any of these cells here, it's going to give you the information. Now you can test this if you want. If I go to put a 3 in here, there is my error alert. If I want to continue, since it's a warning, I can just override it and put yes. But since I know I don't need to put any information here, I'm going to hit no, and I'm just going to delete that information. But that's the difference between a warning message and the stop message. Stop won't let you continue. The warning message will. All right, let's go back to our directions. See, we've got step 6 done. Let's look at step 7. In the Spa Invoice worksheet, the date entered in cell E6 should be restricted to the current date or earlier. Thus, invoices may not be dated with a future date. To ensure accuracy of the data entry, you will create a date validation. We're going to do that here in cell E6. So in our invoice worksheet, go to cell E6 and create that date validation that verifies that the date is less than or equal to today. And here's the formula for today. And then here's our input title, our input message, our error alert title, and our error message. Once we've got that created, we're going to go in cell E6 and we're going to type in today and see if it will accept today's date, not a future date. And you can test it if you want to put a future date as well. But all this is going to be done in E6. So let's go do that now. Scroll up here to E6. We're going to do data validation again. Settings. What are we going to allow? We're going to allow a date. And our date was verified as less than or equal to today. And then we're going to put our formula in for today. Go to our input message. Go ahead and put in all of your input title, message, and then we'll go to our error alert. So I've got my input message done. I'm going to go to my error, put in my title, and now put in my message. Once you've got that done, hit OK. And now let's go ahead and try to put in our today as our value for what date we want. And you can see that it does take it. Now if you wanted to test this, if you wanted to put in a date, let's say, a future date, we'll just say 11/29, 2030. Hit enter, and it allowed it. It should not have, because that date is definitely in the future. So we need to check our data validation rule. You can see that it overwrote, so we need to make sure that that does not occur. So make sure if that happened to you, go back in and recreate your data validation rule. So I just hit undo real quick and I put mine back in. You can see it's still showing today's date, so I'm just going to type in a future date and make sure that it was just a weird glitch. So we'll try that date again, 11/28/2030. See what it does. I got my error alert. That's what I was hoping. That was really odd, but just make sure if it happened to you that you still see the information here, your input message. Mine disappeared for some reason. I don't really have an answer why. I would just make sure that your data validation rule stayed. I don't know why mine just all of a sudden disappeared. All right, so that's fixed. Let's jump back over and take a look at our directions. So with step 8 here, I'm going to scroll down so we can see that better. I'm going to add another validation criteria to cell E8 to ensure that only a time value between 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. Can be entered. So we're going to create that, and you can see it is going to be for time value. So go to cell E8, enter that time data validation that will limit the entry to start time of 8:30 a.m. end time of 5 p.m. so that no values outside those parameters can be put. And here's our input title, our input message, our error alert, and our error message. Once we've got that done, we'll go back into cell E8 and type in 3 p.m. to see if that accepts or not. So let's go ahead and jump back over there now. So E8. Now let's create this time data validation. So data validation. Go to settings. Allow. This is a time. And we know that the time is between 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. So we've got that information in there. We're going to go to our input message and our title for that. We're going to put that information in now, as well as our input message. Once we've got that information put in, jump over to the error alert tab. This is the last piece of information we're going to put in. And we're going to put in our title, of course, and our error message. So once we got that done, we'll hit OK. And now we're going to go ahead and go to our cell and put in a time to see make sure we're in the correct parameters. We're going to put in 3 p.m. Hit enter, and of course it accepts. So if we would have put a date that was outside those parameters, we would expect the message that we put in the error alert to pop up and say, hey, the time must be between 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. So that is it for step 8, I believe. Let's go back over and check. That definitely concludes step 8. Now let's take a look at step 9. We're going to do another validation to prevent cells from becoming too long. So on the invoice worksheet, the length of our comments cell down there in cell C31, we need to limit that to 200 characters. So go to cell C31, create a text length data validation rule that limits that text to less than 200 characters, and then put in the input and error alert titles and messages. Go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to scroll down here to C31. You can see I've been validating that by checking my name box. Once again, data tools here on the data tab, data validation, settings. It's going to be a text length, and it can be the text length no less than or equal to 200 characters. So less than or equal to 200 characters. Put our value 200. Go to your input message and then put in your input message title and the message itself. Then your error alert. So error, and then your error message must be 200 characters or less. And hit OK. Now you don't have to test this, but we can see that it is working. We're getting our input message there, so we're sure the error message is going to work as well if you want to test that out and put more than 200 characters. Let's go back and see what our next direction is. And we're going to scroll down to step 10 here. On our invoice worksheet in cell D33, we're going to enter a data validation that will display data entry prompts. We want to input the tax rate, and we want to see all items and services require sales tax. And that's it. That's all this is an information. There's no error. We're just giving the user some information. So let's go put that data in and create that data validation rule in cell D33 now. So if we click on cell D33 here, Remember, this is only an information prompt, so it's still a data validation. We're just not really doing anything here. We're just creating an input message. It says this is a tax rate and that all items and services require a sales tax. So anytime a user comes to the cell, they'll just be given this information that all of our items and our services require a sales tax, and here's what that rate is. And that's all it is. So once you hit OK, that's all you need to do for this step. We'll scroll down and we'll take a look at step 11 now. And in cell 11, we're going to do this is kind of a complicated formula that we're going to use for our data validation, but it's just to make sure that we're using the right room numbers. So we're going to just put exactly what they tell us to put in, and then we're going to test it out by putting in a room number which falls in our scale. 3120 should work. Now if we did like a 6002 or 6005, it should not work because it's greater than or equal to 5. If we did one that was like 0001, it would not work because it is less than 1. So let's go ahead and make sure we put that information in just like it says here, and we'll get that data validation rule for our room numbers created. So let's go to cell E12. So I'm going to scroll back up here, and I'm going to do my data validation for my custom data validation. So settings, allow, here's custom. And I'm going to put my formula in here. Now I'm going to go to my input message, put that information in for my title, my input, and then for my error alert. So I've got my input done. I'm going to put my error in. Once that's done, I'm hit OK. I see my prompt. Here I'm going to just put in the number like it said, 3120. Hit enter, and it took. Now, if I try to put in something quirky, let's say I try to put in, 5,333 and hit enter, there is my error message as I expected. So I'm going to hit cancel, and now I'm back to where I was. So that completes step 11, and that completes this first half of our lecture.